Elias Thorne's ship shivered as it cut through the icy clouds of the distant exoplanet. The surface below was a frozen wasteland, jagged cliffs and deep crevasses stretching farther than the eye could see. He had been sent to survey the planet for rare wildlife, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he was about to find. The scanners on his suit beeped urgently, picking up an enormous life form in distress. Elias's heart skipped a beat when the readings confirmed it, a massive albino dragon, her body frail and trembling. His breath caught in his throat. Dragons were legends in most parts of the galaxy, but here she was, real and alive, though clearly suffering. Elias landed carefully on a narrow ice ledge, the wind howling around him. The dragon's cries were sharp and painful, echoing across the frozen mountains. Each sound made his chest ache. He had seen animals in danger before, but the raw agony in her cries was different. It was not just fear, it was pain, deep and endless. He crouched a few meters away, studying her massive form. Her scales were a pale, almost glowing white, and her wings, though folded, were huge and delicate-looking. She moved slightly, but each movement seemed to cost her enormous effort. Elias could see scars along her body, probably from fights with other predators or poachers. Her eyes opened slowly, a soft, haunting pink, filled with pain and confusion. For a moment, it seemed like she was pleading, not for food, not for shelter, but for someone to understand her suffering. Elias's mind raced. He had no choice but to act. If he left, the dragon would die, and he knew no one would believe the stories of a living albino dragon here. He remembered the eggs in the nest near her. The dragon mother's condition was critical. If she died now, the eggs wouldn't survive the harsh cold. The thought made him tighten his fists. He couldn't let that happen. Not if there was even a small chance he could help. He moved slowly toward her, speaking in soft, calm tones. He hoped the sound of his voice would be comforting. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." He reached into his backpack and pulled out some nutrient packs, though he doubted she could eat them in her condition. Still, he tried. The dragon's eyes followed him, wary at first, then curious. She shifted her massive head, letting out a weak hiss. Elias froze. He had learned in training that any sudden move could startle her, and in her fragile state, that could be fatal. He waited patiently, watching her breathe, counting each shallow, labored gasp. Hours passed like minutes. Elias realized that help wasn't going to come from anywhere else. He was alone. The wind was bitter, slicing through his suit. Yet, he refused to leave her side. He touched one of her scales lightly, and for the briefest moment, she flinched but did not pull away. That small act of trust made his heart lift. He studied the eggs next to her. They were pale, almost transparent, and he could see faint movements inside some of them. Time was running out. Elias knew the planet's temperatures would kill the unborn dragons if their mother didn't survive long enough to keep them warm. He had to make a choice. He could try to transport her and risk everything, or he could stay and try to stabilize her here. Elias's mind flashed back to his childhood. He had grown up hearing stories of humans who risked everything to save something greater than themselves. He had always wondered if he could ever do the same. Now, standing before this suffering creature, he knew he had to. He set his backpack down and pulled out the nanobot kit he carried for research. It was experimental technology, designed to help stabilize injured animals and even humans in emergencies. It had never been tested on a dragon, and he didn't know if it would work. But doing nothing was not an option. He took a deep breath, thinking of the eggs, of the life that depended on him, and he began preparing the procedure. The dragon's mother groaned softly as he worked, her body shaking. Elias whispered to her, telling her he was there, telling her he would not let her die. She looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw something he couldn't describe: gratitude, fear, and the faintest spark of hope. Suddenly, a crack of ice echoed across the valley, reminding him how dangerous the environment was. The ledge could collapse at any moment, and if it did, both he and the dragon could fall into the freezing abyss below. He ignored the fear gnawing at him and focused entirely on her, on keeping her alive, on protecting the eggs. For the first time in hours, the dragon moved slightly toward him. It was a small, almost imperceptible motion, but it told Elias she was still alive, still fighting, still trusting him. His hands shook as he adjusted the nanobot injector, knowing the next steps could determine the fate of an entire species. Elias whispered again, this time with certainty, "We're going to make it. You and your babies, will survive this together." As the icy wind roared around them and the sun dipped behind the jagged mountains, a fragile, tense silence fell over the ledge. Human courage and dragon suffering were intertwined now, and neither would be the same after this day. The distant galaxy would never know how close it came to losing a legend today. But Elias knew, in his heart, that his choice, to act, to risk everything, was only the beginning of a story that would change more than one life forever. Elias Thorne stared at the dragon mother, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. The bitter wind bit at his face, but he hardly noticed. The freezing cold, the jagged cliffs, and the danger of the ledge all seemed small compared to the choice he now faced. He had the chance to save her, but it was risky. A single mistake could mean death for him, the dragon, and the eggs. He looked at the eggs lying in the snow beside her. They were fragile, pale shells glowing faintly in the dim light. Some twitched slightly, signaling life inside. Elias knew that if the dragon died, the eggs would freeze and shatter. He swallowed hard. He couldn't let that happen. But the choice was not simple. He had no backup. No reinforcements. The ship was too small to transport her quickly, and the icy wind made every second dangerous. The harsh terrain could collapse under them at any moment. He could leave now, report the discovery, and maybe return with help, but by then, it would be too late. Elias shook his head. He had made his decision. He would stay and try to save her right here. He couldn't let fear control him. Humans were capable of extraordinary things, and he had to prove that. He pulled the nanobot kit closer, his fingers trembling slightly. The instructions were complex, even for someone trained in xenobiology. These nanobots could repair cells, boost blood flow, and stabilize critical injuries, but they had never been tested on a dragon of this size. The risk was immense. Still, doing nothing was worse. He prepared the injector, taking slow, careful breaths. He whispered to the dragon mother, trying to calm both himself and her. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm here. I won't let you die. We'll get through this together." The dragon stirred, a low, painful groan escaping her throat. Her eyes opened slightly, watching him. She flinched as he approached, but did not try to attack. Elias saw a faint spark of recognition in her gaze. She trusted him, or at least, she realized he wasn't her enemy. As he worked, the wind howled around them. Ice sheets cracked far below, sending echoes through the frozen valley. Elias kept glancing at the eggs, making sure they were still safe. He realized that the survival of an entire generation depended on his actions. That thought made his heart pound, but also strengthened his resolve. Hours seemed to pass in moments. Elias carefully injected the nanobots into her foreleg, monitoring her reactions. The dragon twitched, a sharp hiss escaping her throat. Elias froze, holding his position. One wrong movement now could trigger panic or worse. He spoke softly, letting her hear the steady sound of his voice. "It's all right. I'm not leaving. Just trust me." The dragon's chest moved slowly, unevenly, but it was movement. That small sign of life made him feel a surge of hope. Elias knew the procedure would take time. He had to stabilize her heart, her lungs, and her blood circulation. The planet's cold made it even harder. He wrapped his own coat around parts of her body to slow the heat loss. His own body shivered under the icy wind, but he ignored it. Nothing mattered except her survival. Then came the moment of truth. He needed to access her main vein to inject a larger dose of nanobots. It was dangerous, the vein was deep, and the dragon could react violently. Elias paused, steadying his hands. He could feel the adrenaline pounding in his veins, but he focused. Years of training and experience came together in one perfect moment. He moved closer, speaking softly. "We can do this," he said, more to himself than to her. The dragon flinched but stayed still. With careful precision, he inserted the injector, letting the nanobots flow into her bloodstream. Her body convulsed slightly, and Elias tensed, fearing the worst. Then, slowly, her breathing began to even out. Elias exhaled, relief washing over him. He knew it was only the beginning. The dragon was stabilized, but not yet safe. He had bought time, and that time could be enough for her to survive the night and protect her eggs. A sudden crack echoed across the valley. Ice sheets were breaking under the shifting wind, threatening the ledge where they stood. Elias froze, realizing how close they were to disaster. But he held his ground. He would not abandon her. Humans had a gift, the ability to act when others hesitated. He would not fail now. The dragon shifted slightly toward him, as if sensing his determination. She hissed softly, a warning, but also an acknowledgement. Elias felt a connection, a bond that went beyond language. He understood her fear, her pain, and her trust. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of red and orange, Elias worked tirelessly, adjusting the nanobots, monitoring her vital signs, and keeping the eggs warm with his coat. He whispered encouragements, not knowing if she understood, but feeling that somehow, she did. For the first time, Elias realized the weight of his choice. He had risked everything, his life, his mission, his reputation, for a creature the galaxy had never believed existed. And yet, standing there in the frozen wasteland, he felt a quiet certainty. This was why humans mattered. This was why courage, empathy, and determination could defy the impossible. The dragon mother's breathing slowed, becoming steady. Her eyes, soft and pink, met his. Elias smiled, exhausted but triumphant. He had made the choice, and that choice, simple yet daring, would not only save her but change the course of history. He looked at the eggs, glowing faintly in the cold, and whispered, "We've got this. We'll make it through." The wind roared around them, but for a moment, the world felt still. Human courage had met the impossible, and for the first time, it seemed like hope might survive this frozen planet too. Elias Thorne's hands shook as he stared at the massive albino dragon mother. Her breathing was steadier now, but she was still too weak to move. He could feel the warmth of her body fading under the icy wind, and he knew he had to act quickly. The nanobots had stabilized her temporarily, but he needed a stronger dose, one that could repair her damaged cells and restore her strength enough to protect her eggs. He studied the injector, carefully checking the settings. The procedure was dangerous. No human had ever attempted it on a creature this size. If he made even a small mistake, the nanobots could overload her system and kill her instantly. Elias's heart pounded in his chest. One wrong move could destroy everything. But he could not turn back now. The dragon's eyes followed him, soft pink and full of pain. She flinched slightly as he moved closer, but she did not try to attack. That small gesture of trust gave him courage. He whispered to her, "We can do this together. Just stay still, I promise." He knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her scaled chest. The skin felt cold and brittle under his fingers. He had to inject the nanobots into the main vein that ran along her foreleg. It was deep, surrounded by thick muscle and sensitive nerves. Elias took a deep breath, steadying his hands. He focused on the task, blocking out the wind, the freezing temperature, and the fear gnawing at him. The dragon's body twitched as he began the injection. A sharp hiss escaped her throat, and Elias froze. He had to time his movements perfectly, or she would panic and throw him off balance. Carefully, he adjusted the angle of the injector, letting the nanobots flow slowly into her bloodstream. He monitored her reactions closely, his eyes scanning for any signs of distress. Minutes passed like hours. The dragon's breathing became more even, her body still trembling but responding to the nanobots. Elias's heart leapt with hope, but he did not relax. The procedure was far from over. He had to make sure her heart and lungs received enough stimulation to sustain her life. He checked the injector again, preparing for the second dose. This one was larger, riskier. It would flood her system with nanobots, accelerating cell repair, but the strain could be fatal if her body could not handle it. Elias hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of responsibility. The dragon's life, the egg's future, and his own survival depended on this choice. He looked at her eyes. The dragon mother was watching him, her gaze filled with pain but also trust. Elias's resolve hardened. He would not fail. He moved the injector carefully, guiding it into the vein. The dragon shuddered, letting out a low roar of discomfort. Elias's hands trembled, but he held steady, slowly releasing the nanobots. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The dragon's body twitched violently, and Elias feared the worst. Then, gradually, her breathing steadied, and her muscles relaxed. The faint glow of life returned to her scales as the nanobots began repairing the damage. Elias exhaled, relief washing over him. He had done it. But the danger was far from over. The icy ledge beneath them groaned under their combined weight. Large cracks spread through the snow and ice, threatening to collapse the ground. Elias glanced down, realizing how close they were to falling into the frozen abyss below. He had to get them to safety, but moving a massive, fragile dragon was nearly impossible. He whispered to the dragon, "We need to move. I'll help you. Trust me." She shifted slightly, struggling to rise, and Elias grabbed his grappling tools. Using every bit of strength and ingenuity, he helped her onto her feet. The dragon's wings were weak, but she flapped them tentatively, testing the cold, stiff air. Elias climbed onto her back carefully, holding onto the thick scales along her neck. The dragon groaned softly, her body shivering, but she moved. With a cautious leap, she pushed off the ice, gliding a few meters before crashing lightly onto a safer ledge. Elias's heart raced, but he refused to panic. Humans were adaptable, and he had to guide her through this. As they moved, he spoke softly to her, keeping her calm. "We're almost safe. Just a little further." Each step was a test of skill, courage, and timing. If she panicked, both of them could fall into the icy chasms below. But she seemed to understand, following his voice and guidance, her massive body trembling but alive. Hours passed as Elias stabilized her further, adjusting the nanobots and keeping her warm with his coat. He whispered encouragements, sometimes talking to himself to maintain focus. Slowly, the dragon began to regain some strength, her breathing steady, her muscles less rigid. The eggs, protected by the warmth of her body and his coat, remained safe. Finally, as night fell and the stars sparkled across the icy sky, Elias leaned back on the dragon's warm scales, exhausted but triumphant. He had risked everything and succeeded. The impossible procedure had worked, and the dragon mother lived, at least for now. He looked at her glowing pink eyes, and for the first time, he saw more than pain. He saw trust, gratitude, and the faintest spark of hope. He whispered, "We made it. You'll live, and so will your babies. I promise." Elias realized something profound as he watched her recover. Humans had the courage, the intellect, and the will to defy impossible odds. One choice, one act of bravery, could change the course of lives, and perhaps even the fate of a species. The wind roared around them, but for the first time, Elias felt a fragile sense of victory. Against all odds, against every warning and prediction, he had saved the dragon. And in doing so, he had proven that humans were capable of the extraordinary. The cold night air pressed hard against Elias Thorne's suit, but he hardly noticed. His hands were sore, his muscles tight, and his mind was exhausted from the impossible procedure. Yet he kept moving, guiding the albino dragon mother carefully across the frozen cliffs. She was stronger now, her breathing more even, but still fragile. The smallest mistake could spell disaster. As they advanced, Elias noticed a change. The dragon was no longer just a creature in pain. She was watching him, responding to his voice, and moving with purpose. Each flap of her wings was slower, cautious, but determined. Elias felt a strange mix of relief and awe. He had not expected this, he had hoped she would survive, but she was already showing signs of trust. The wind howled, carrying the sharp scent of ice and snow. The frozen cliffs were jagged and dangerous, but Elias guided her through a path he had spotted earlier. Every step was calculated. One slip, and they could fall hundreds of meters into the icy depths. Yet, in the dragon's eyes, he saw something incredible. She understood that he was her ally. Hours passed, and the dragon mother began to move with more confidence. She lifted her massive wings higher, testing the air. Elias's heart raced. He knew that soon, if she could muster enough strength, she might fly them to safety. But the terrain was narrow and treacherous, and he had to guide her carefully. Suddenly, the dragon mother stumbled on a thin layer of ice. Elias grabbed onto her scales, steadying her, and whispered softly, "You can do this. Just a little more." She stopped for a moment, then raised her head, looking at him with eyes that seemed almost human in their emotion. He felt a surge of connection, a bond forming that went beyond species. He remembered the eggs nestled beside her. They were still safe, but the cold was relentless. Elias carefully wrapped his coat around them as the dragon steadied herself. The eggs twitched faintly, as if reacting to his touch. Elias realized something profound. This bond he shared with the dragon was not just about survival. It was about trust, empathy, and courage. As the night deepened, the first hints of dawn began to color the sky. Elias and the dragon were nearing a safer plateau, a place where the ice was thicker and the wind less harsh. He encouraged her to keep moving, speaking in calm, steady tones. "Almost there. You're stronger than you think. I believe in you." The dragon's breathing grew heavier, but she moved forward, responding to his guidance. Elias held onto her back, gripping the thick scales along her neck. He felt every muscle in her body tense and relax with each step. For a moment, he realized how fragile yet powerful she was. Humans had their courage, but dragons had endurance beyond imagination. Together, they were unstoppable. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed across the plateau. Elias froze. Another section of ice was breaking off nearby, sending a cascade of snow and ice tumbling down. The dragon shivered, sensing the danger. Elias held her steady, whispering reassurance. "Stay calm. We can do this. Trust me." She flapped her wings weakly but followed his voice, moving away from the breaking ice. The adrenaline surged through Elias's veins. He knew they were still not safe, but the dragon's response filled him with hope. He had not just stabilized her physically, he had earned her trust. And that trust would save them both. After what felt like hours, they reached a narrow valley shielded by high cliffs. The wind was calmer here, and the ice beneath their feet was more solid. The dragon stopped, lowering her massive body to the ground. Elias carefully climbed down, checking her for injuries. She looked at him, her pink eyes soft and calm. He could see relief, gratitude, and something else, an understanding that he had become more than just a human to her. Elias knelt beside her, placing his hand on her chest. "You did it. We made it this far. And we'll make it further," he whispered. The dragon responded with a low, rumbling growl, almost like a purr. Elias smiled, exhausted but deeply moved. He had never felt such a bond with any creature before. He looked at the eggs again, glowing faintly in the cold. The dragon lowered her head toward them, nudging them gently with her snout. Elias realized that their survival was no longer just about his actions, it was about their cooperation. Together, human and dragon, they had created a fragile but powerful alliance. As the sun began to rise, painting the valley with shades of gold and pink, Elias understood the full significance of what they had done. Humans had the courage to face impossible odds. They had the creativity to act when logic failed. And they had the heart to earn trust where no one else could. The dragon's mother, now stronger and more alert, lifted her head and looked at Elias. He reached out and touched her scaled cheek. "We're in this together," he said softly. For the first time, he felt that the impossible procedure, the danger, and the endless hours of risk were all worth it. In that moment, on the frozen planet with the first light of dawn, human and dragon shared a bond that would change their lives forever. Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The eggs were safe, the dragon was alive, and together, they had proven something extraordinary: humans could rise to challenges that no one else dared face. And far beyond the icy cliffs, in the depths of space, the galaxy would one day hear the story of a human who trusted, risked, and bonded with a creature thought lost to legend. Elias Thorne watched the albino dragon mother as she stretched her massive wings. The sun had fully risen now, casting golden light over the icy valley. Her scales shimmered, faint pink veins glowing as the nanobots continued their work. She moved more confidently than before, her body no longer trembling with weakness. The eggs nestled beside her glowed softly, safe from the cold. Elias allowed himself a small smile. They had survived the impossible night. But even as relief washed over him, Elias knew the story was far from over. Word of his actions, if it ever reached the wider galaxy, would shake the minds of many. Humans had saved a creature thought extinct, or at least unreachable. A human had defied all odds, risking his life, against impossible environmental hazards, alien biology, and predatory dangers. He had done something extraordinary, and the universe would notice. The dragon mother lowered her head, nudging Elias gently. He patted her scaled cheek, feeling the warmth returning to her body. "We did it," he whispered. "You're going to survive, and so will your babies." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he felt an unspoken connection. He was no longer just a human helping a creature, he had become part of her life, part of her story. He looked at the eggs. Tiny movements beneath the translucent shells gave him hope. They would hatch. He could almost feel the life inside responding to their shared struggle. Elias realized that this fragile bond, born from trust and courage, had changed everything. Not just for the dragon mother, not just for the eggs, but for humans themselves. Elias considered what would happen next. Poachers, galactic authorities, and researchers would hear of the albino dragon mother's survival. Some would come seeking to capture her. Others might see humans in a new light, capable of empathy, courage, and brilliance that could alter life itself. He knew that this moment could inspire stories, legends, even revolutions. Humans, when they chose to act with heart and skill, could challenge the impossible. A sudden tremor in the ice reminded him that danger was never far. He glanced up at the cliffs surrounding them. The frozen peaks were jagged and unforgiving, and the wind still cut through the valley like a blade. Yet the dragon stood tall, her massive wings casting shadows across the snow. Elias felt pride swell inside him. Against every prediction, they had survived. Against every danger, they had endured. As he prepared to move the dragon mother and the eggs to a safer, hidden location, Elias considered the bond they had formed. She had trusted him when she could have attacked. She had allowed a human to guide her, to stabilize her body, to help her survive. And he had risked everything for her. That trust, that mutual courage, was rare in the galaxy. It was proof of something larger, proof of human potential. Slowly, he mounted the dragon mother's back again, holding firmly onto the thick scales along her neck. She lifted her wings carefully, testing the air. With a powerful leap, she glided across the valley, landing safely on a wider plateau. Elias felt the strength returning to her muscles, the grace returning to her movements. She was no longer just a victim of the planet's cruelty, she was a living testament to resilience, to hope, and to human courage. As they reached the new plateau, the dragon mother lowered herself, letting Elias off. He knelt beside the eggs, brushing snow away gently. They were alive, and she seemed to sense the renewed safety. Elias whispered, "You're going to be okay. You and your children." The dragon lowered her head, almost touching him, a gesture of trust and acknowledgement. Elias had earned it, and in that moment, he felt the enormity of what he had accomplished. He knew that far beyond this remote planet, the galaxy would hear the story eventually. Humans had a reputation for being curious, reckless, or self-serving, but here, one human had proven something extraordinary. Courage, empathy, and ingenuity could save lives thought lost, could defy odds no one else dared challenge. A single human choice had changed the fate of a species. Elias stood and looked at the Dragon Mother one last time before turning to the horizon. Her wings stretched wide, catching the sunlight. He imagined her flying into the wider world, protecting her eggs, surviving against threats, and reminding every species that humans could rise to challenges no one else would. He had not just saved a life, he had created hope, forged trust, and shown the galaxy what humanity could do. As he prepared to return to his ship, Elias felt a surge of determination. This was just the beginning. The Dragon Mother would thrive, and with her, the albino dragon lineage would survive. And humans? Humans had proven once more that when faced with impossible odds, they could act with courage, compassion, and intelligence. They could change worlds. Looking back at the Dragon Mother and her eggs, Elias whispered softly, "The galaxy is watching, and we've shown them what humans are capable of." The dragon rumbled, a deep, resonant sound that seemed almost like approval. Elias smiled, exhausted but victorious. The icy winds of the exoplanet carried the faint roar of a living legend. A human had dared, had risked, and had saved a species. The galaxy would never forget it. And somewhere far beyond the stars, those who heard the story would be stunned, not just by the dragon's survival, but by the courage of the human who refused to turn away.